Hello, all. Welcome to the second session of the first series of free training. In today's session, we will be discussing on application performance monitoring. And quickly, let's check today's agenda. Drill down to the problematic elements in your application code. Monitor code flows across applications via distributed tracing. Gain code level visibility with thread profiling. Visualize dependencies in your application architecture with automated service maps. So, before discussing the topics in the agenda, let us start off with why an application's performance monitoring is needed. If you look at the scenario, you can see users accessing or making transactions in a website and have provided negative review for some reasons. The reason could be an application which has been accessed by the users might be slow and have taken a long time to load. So this leads to a loss of customers, and for the developers who are working in this web application are unsure of the root cause. So in this current scenario, the demand for using an application has increased, which has also led to the complexity in its development. Hence, it is necessary to use a monitoring tool like the APM Insight. These are Gartner's 5 dimensions of APM functionality. First one is the end user monitoring. This helps us to understand the behavioral aspect of an user while interacting with a website or web application. The second one is application topology, discovery, and visualization, using which the various applications running on different servers and network devices within the network infrastructure can be discovered and map their dependencies. The third one is user defined transaction profiling. This is a functionality that assists in tracking the user activities in an application across all the components. The fourth one is application component deep dive. It is the ability to analyze and understand the behavior of the different component within an application. And the last one is IT operation analytics. So using this option, we can get the necessary information to understand the behavior of the environment through the reports and analytics. So these are some of the benefits versus modern versus traditional approach in building an application. So there are 4 benefits. Let us see each one in brief. The first one is application availability. With the increasing dependency on application and wide usage of it has made the application to be always available to the users. So a group of microservices are built instead of a large monolithic application. So the development of the technologies like containerization and load balancing has helped the organization to achieve high availability. The second one is cost reduction. With the advent of cloud computing capabilities, organizations no longer need to spend more money to build large infrastructures and thereby save their capital expenditure. The third one is compliance tracking. We know that every applications are developed based on a particular standard. So depending upon the industrial standards like HIPAA for healthcare, FIPS for USA government, we can easily track if an application follows those standards. And the last one is operational efficiency. As discussed in our last session, using the dependency mapping, you can easily identify the faulty component of the application quickly in a single click and then identify the down application much more faster for instant diagnosis of the problem. So far we have discussed why an application performance monitoring is necessary. In Applications Manager, the performance monitoring tool is called APM Insight. The supported technologies in APM Insight are Java, Node.js, .NET Core, Microsoft .NET, PHP, and Ruby Rails. Let us see the functioning of the APM Insight Monitor. The APM Insight is an agent-based monitoring tool. The remote agent needs to be deployed in the machine where your application server is running. And then this agent will perform the task of data collection, data acquisition, and data transmission. The agent residing in the application server uses the bytecode instrumentation method to collect the data from the application and sends it to the applications manager at a fixed time interval. So in our today's session, let us see an example for adding the APM Insight Monitor. So for that, I will be considering the Applications Manager as the application server and add it as a monitor. So when you log into the Applications Manager product, the UI will be like this under the APM tab. So under this tab, the various agents will be available. So depending on the application type that you're looking to monitor, you can download the agent and configure it. So in our today's session, we will monitor the applications manager. So for that, I will be downloading the Java agent and configure the agent with the applications manager first, and then configure the agent with the application server and check the data collection happening in the APM Insight Monitor. So for that, we have already downloaded the application agent, I mean the Java agent, and extracted the configuration and jar files of the agent. Once the jar files and the configuration files are extracted, we will open the APM Insight configuration file initially and place the license key in the file. So the license key of your applications manager will be available in the UI itself. So in the UI, you can collect the license key and then place it in the APM Insight configuration file. And then I will be providing the applications manager's host details like the host name and its port number. The port number can be either a web server port or an SSL port. So once this is done, we will be binding the applications manager with the Java agent. The next step is to bind the Java agent with your application server. So since the applications manager is installed as a service, the startup file of the applications manager will be wrapper.conf, in which I will pass the Java arguments of this Java agent so that the binding of your Java agent with the application server will be completed and we can restart the application server. So here in this file, this is the place I have passed the Java argument. So once this is done, I'll restart the application server. So by this, the monitor will be added. So once the monitor is added, and when we make transactions in the application, the data collection will start happening in the UI. So let us go back to our presentation to discuss the topic in our today's agenda and then come back to the product to discuss about the various metrics of your APM Insight Monitor. Moving to our first topic in agenda, drill down to the problematic elements in your application code. Let us see some of the factors that are affecting the performance of the application. The first factor is high response time. In case of a slow connection to the web application can lead to network trafficking and the transaction consumes a longer time, which can lead to poor response time. The second one is application code. An application can have a large number of bugs affecting the functions and the performance of the application. These bugs in the code can cause exceptions that might result in the transaction execution failures. The stack trace can be used to identify all these buggy code issues to improve and fix the application code. The third one is memory. High usage of the web application and not optimized application at the code level may cause high consumption of memory from its allocated space in the machine, which leads to memory leaks and out of memory. And the fourth one is the database calls. For instance, the database calls and queries pertaining to any specific transaction could become highly loaded, affecting the entire performance of the application. Hence, for the developers who are working in the application can be dependent on this APM Insight monitoring tool to keep an eye on the factors that are affecting the performance. So by now, you would be more interested on configuring the key business transaction to monitor the entire performance of the application effectively. So in this slide, we shall see on configuring the key transactions of your business operation. There could be a high volume of activities made in an application, and all the transactions will be captured, among which you can select the key business transactions that you want to monitor and set threshold based on the response time of the transaction. So once this is done, you can get the alerts if there is a performance issue with any particular key business transaction and understand the customer experience out of it. Moving on to monitor code flows across applications via distributed tracing. So let us first understand why what is a what is a distributed tracing is. In a microservice architecture, it is necessary to monitor the transactions made between two applications or services. So with distributed tracing feature, you can track the transaction traces made from one application to another application, and this will enable you to monitor the calls made between the two applications and narrow down the problem. Hence, this is also called as cross application tracing. Let us understand how the tracking is done in the distributed tracing. We all know that API calls are made between two applications. So when an API request is made by an application to another application, the APM Insight will add HTTP header containing the metadata required to track the request. If the APM Insight is enabled in the other application, this will process the HTTP header and return the tracking information to its caller via the response headers. And if the other application in turn calls another application or a service, the header propagation will continue and trace all the paths that are taken by the origin application across the distributed system. So using this data, we can monitor the start time, that is the time when the transaction was initiated, the response time taken for each and every transaction to respond within an application, and the name of the transactions and the applications. So the next key feature is auto scaling in an APM Insight Monitor. It is supported for cloud environments like Azure, AWS, GCP, and Docker. So in a cloud environment, whenever an application automatically scales up, a newly instances is added. However, when these applications are scaled down, the newly added instances become unused and are still retained. So this leads to the license being consumed by the unused instances. So by this, it will result to the new instance not being added for monitoring. Hence, with the help of the auto scale mode in the APM Insight Monitor, you can overcome this scenario by automatically unmanaging or deleting the unused instances in the cloud environment. Next, we shall discuss on gain code level visibility with thread profiling. Here, let us see the need for a thread profiling under the topic eliminate issues in problematic code. As you are aware, the stack trace represents the movement of an application during the execution of a program. When Java application throws an exception, stack trace gets logged within it. And when a program is executed, the memory is often dynamically allocated in two places. One is the stack and the other one is the heap. So the memory is continuously allocated on a stack but not on a heap. Hence, in this scenario, the thread profiling enables you to identify and isolate the bottlenecks in your code stack. Finally, moving on to the last topic of our today's presentation, visualize dependencies in your application architecture with automated service map. So a service map will provide a complete overview of the application infrastructure along with its connection to the other dependent resources. So using the service map, we will be easily identify the status of an application and the instances, monitor the key metrics like the response time, throughput, and status of the connection, and detect the number of failed requests and troubleshoot the application problem before the customers are impacted. There are three types of service map view, table view, and graph view. In a map view, it will provide the way and the way of analyzing the topology view of the application along with its instances, and these are represented in a central node. Now let's look at how the all these can be achieved in the APM Insight Monitor. So for that, we will go back to the product, and also we will discuss on generating the reports, configuring alarms for the performance metrics. So here, this is the APM Insight Monitor. So as we know, when a transaction is made in an application, and if there is any slowness occurring, we know that there could be many reasons like the exceptions, there could be errors happening, the database corresponding to the application could have any slow database calls, and each and every transaction needs to be monitored individually. So for that, in this APM Insight, we have all these parameters being monitored separately. Let us see one by one. Under the Monitor Information tab, initially we will be able to get the agent details. Moving on to the Overview tab, it will help us fetch the status of the APM Insight Monitor, like the availability status and the health status. And we will be able to get the AppDex score, the average response time, the data throughput, and any exceptions in it. So the response time, it is the amount of transaction time taken by the application to return the results of a request that is made by an user. And the AppDex score, it is the performance index, which is a standard that is used to measure the overall satisfaction regarding the application. So for calculating the AppDex score, we will be collecting a total number of samples. So the total number of samples represents the transaction made at a specific time period. So based on the total samples, the satisfied count along with the half of the tolerating count divided by the total samples gives us this AppDex score. So this is a decimal value which ranges from 0 to 1. So the value 0, it represents no users are interested or satisfied, and 1 represents the all the users are interested. So based on this, it can be categorized as frustrated, tolerating, and satisfied. And under the transaction tab, we will be able to monitor the individual transaction made in the application. So this will let us know the action which has consumed the longer time, the frequently accessed transaction, and get a tier-wise breakdown of the transaction from the individual application level to the transaction level. So further, when I click on the individual transaction, I will be able to monitor the most recent traces and the slowest traces. And also I can monitor the response time taken by the transaction broken by its components like app code, the JDBC calls, and the overall response time. So here we can sort this transactions either based on the request or errors or the average response time, etc. Whatever that you can see on the monitor. So if I sort this based on the CPU, so this particular transaction has taken the highest CPU. So based on that, when I click on it, it will show me the individual transactions under it which has consumed the maximum CPU. And I can check for the errors if there is any errors that has occurred for the transactions. And also I can configure key transactions from this page. So as we had discussed earlier, we can configure the key business transactions. So here we have already configured some of the key business transaction. And let us try to check how this is seen in the UI. So these are the, based on the time period that I have selected for the last 7 days, these are the main key transactions that are monitored. So based on this, I can try to configure the threshold based for the response time and get alerted when there is a threshold breach. Next is the database. So under this database, we will be getting the database operations in the backend when a transaction was made. So using this, we will be able to identify the slowest database call. And when we click on the individual database operation, we can get the list of web applications that are invoked by this particular database. For instance, these are the list of database operations that has occurred in the last 7 days. So when I click on the, I can sort it out based on the response time. And this particular table has consumed 22.5 milliseconds. And when I click on the database, I will be able to know which transaction has invoked this table. Okay. And also try to generate all these database operation in CSV, Excel, and PDF format. This is available in graph view and raw view. Next, moving on to the traces. So the traces will provide the insights into the detailed records of the actions performed by the user. And with the help of it, you can identify the bottlenecks of the operation within the application. Now, if I sort it out based on the response time, this particular transaction has taken the slowest response time. So when I go to the particular transaction, it gives me and detailed information like the trace details, the SQL statements, the remote calls like API calls and the DB calls, exceptions in it. And I can also check the error count of the particular transaction. You can see this is the information that we get about a transaction by checking the trace details. So this has given me the individual trace detail, the delay time, the exclusive time, and the total time taken by the traces. The next one is the SQL statements. So this will help me understand the query start time of the individual database operation and the execution time taken for the particular table that has been invoked by the transaction. So since this is a JVM based monitor, so since this is a JVM based monitor, the JVM tab will be available only in this APM Insight monitor, which is added with Java agent. So under which we will be able to monitor the Java metrics like CPU usage, heap memory, non-heap memory, the runtime memory of the Java, heap memory used and non-heap memory used, and also the garbage collector, the threads of the JVM, and also the configuration. Then in the exceptions tab, it will help you to identify the different types of exceptions and the errors that are affecting the performance of the application. Sorry, with a detailed graphical and tabular representation. So as you can see, these are the top exceptions that were made when a transaction was made by an user. So when I go to the individual exception, it will provide me the exception count in a graphical representation. And I can get the recent 5 traces of this exception. So let me change the time period to the last 7 days or the last 30 days. So as you can see, these are the error count and the transaction split up. Okay, so there was no data available for the time period that we have selected. But for whenever the time period is selected, if there were any transactions made in the application by the users, all those data will be collected and analyzed in the APM Insight Monitor. Next, moving on to the service map. So in this map view, the application along with their instances will be represented in the central node. So the outer circle will represent the application and the inner circle will represent the instance. So here the instance status are available in red, green, purple, and pink. So the red indicates if an application or the instance is down. The green indicates if an application or the instance is up. The purple indicates if an instance is in unmanaged state. The pink indicates if an application or the instance is in scheduled maintenance. The graph view will list out the parameters of the average and the total response time, the throughput, the request, and also the error counts. So using these metrics, we will be able to view all the components like the HTTPL call, the PG-SQL, and also the individual components and for individual host. Moving on to the table view, it will provide me the So the table view will list out all the down all or the components along with their respective host. So clicking on the individual component or the host, we will be able to take the corresponding graph view. So if I click on the HTTP call, it will take me to the graph view corresponding to this particular component. So let us see how we can try configuring the alarms for each and every metric in the APM Insight. So under the actions, we have the option to configure the alarms. So moving to this page, we can try configuring the alarm to the metrics like the response time, the AppDex score, the frustrated, satisfied, and tolerating percentile, the runtime free memory, the errors count, and the fatal count, request count. So if you're not aware of or not sure of how to configure the threshold, you can try generating the historical report for the individual attribute. And based on the data collected from the report, you can try to set the threshold. So we have done for two metrics, the response time and the aptX score. So now we are looking at configuring the alarm only at the monitor level. So this will be applied only for this particular APM Insight monitor. But if you're looking to have the same threshold for all the monitors, then you'll have to configure it globally. That is, you need to go to the configure alarms from the UI, select the monitor type, and choose the monitor type as APM Insight. And from there, you can try to configure the threshold and the actions. So once the threshold and the actions are configured from here, this will be associated to all the metrics that are available in the APM Insight, that is to all the APM Insight monitors. This is a second way of configuring the alarm. Next, moving on to the reporting. So if you're looking to generate reports for these metrics that you're viewing, you need to initially make sure that the reporting is enabled for all these metrics. So only when the reporting is enabled for these metrics, you will be able to generate the historical data. So the historical data can be generated from the UI and also from the reports tab. So let me show you how to generate it from the reports tab. So moving to the reports tab, I can try to generate the report for the APM Insight Monitor from the applications servers, choosing the APM Insight as the server type. And from here, I will be choosing the attribute name. For example, if I'm trying to generate the report for API AppDex, I will try to select that particular attribute, and all the APM Insight Monitors AppDex report will be generated from here. There is another way of generating the report for this APM Insight Monitor. That is, I can choose the trend analysis report. So from here, I will be choosing the uh, application, the APM Insight Monitor, and try to generate the report based on that particular APM Insight only. So here we will be able to get the last 7 days report, or if you want, you can try to change the time period to last 30 days or last month. So based on the time period that you choose, we can try to generate all the reports from this page. So let us see some of the other components or things that is related to the APM Insight, like the APM Insight agent configuration profile. So this is a profile in the APM Applications Manager, which is available to configure the basic profiles of the agent and to configure the web transactions that you make. Like for example, the standard or the default AppDex threshold value will be 0.5, which can also be altered from this particular page based on your requirement. And also here, I would like to mention about one particular metric or one particular option, that is obfuscate SQL parameters. So this is an option that is used to hide any crucial or any specific data in your table. For example, there could be some confidential information available in a table which can be hidden by selecting this particular option. In general, we would suggest to keep this option enabled, as by disabling, in case if there is any confidential data that can get disclosed in the public. So to avoid it, it is better to have this option always enabled. So there is another option that I would like to mention about is the transaction trace threshold. Uh, So this is actually used to choose in case whose response time is above the value that we set here will be captured and the alert will be triggered, affecting the health of the APM Insight monitor. And under the settings tab, we can go to the performance polling and try to configure the data retention for the individual transactions of this APM Insight. So that is from this performance polling, we can see the cleanup time or the data retention time for the APM Insight monitor and the data collection limits that we have set for the web transactions or the background transactions, the exceptions. All these values can be altered only based on your database size. So in case if you're trying to increase the values or the limits from this page can have an impact on the entire applications manager. So depending on the uh, present database load, we can try modifying all these values. Moving back to the APM Insight monitor, let me show you some of the other details like to generate the report of the transactions or the database operations from the UI itself. So here in this transaction tab, uh, okay. So here in this transaction tab, I can generate or export this particular page in either CSV or uh, Excel or PDF format. So the same thing applies to the database operations as well. So if I try generating the report, like for example, we will see how it looks when I generate the database tab in a PDF format. So all the data that you have just seen in the UI will be in a report format, which you can use for your reference. The same thing will be available for traces tab as well. Also, you can check the alarm history. That is, with this history, you will be able to get an idea of what are the alarms that are recently triggered in the APM Insight monitor. So with this, you will be able to understand if a particular application was down at any particular time. And you can also monitor the other attributes history using which you will be able to get the response time, the AppDeck score, the alerts that are triggered for the response time and the AppDeck score. Depending on these alerts, you can try to take any necessary actions to clear all these alerts. So I hope with all these details, you would have got an idea of how the APM Insight monitor works and how the data collection is happening inside the monitor and view the exceptions or in case of there is any errors in the data collection of the transactions made by any users. So with this, we will be coming to an end of the today's presentation. We will have a quick recap of what we have discussed till now. So we have discussed about configuring the agent. So once we have configured the agent and hook the agent with the applications manager and the application server and restarted the application server, the monitor will be added, which you can see in the UI. And we will be able to see the other metrics like the exceptions and the distributed tracing, the app parameters, and the database operations. Also, let me show you how the or the what are the Java-based applications that can be monitored. So from here, we can try to know the list of Java-based applications that can be monitored. That is the Tomcat, the web applications like JBoss, Jira, Glassfish, WebLogic, Oracle WebLogic, and the IBM WebSphere. So in prior to configuring all these APM Insight monitors, there are a certain prerequisites like the framework and the database, which needs to be initially checked. So depending on that, you will be able to configure the APM Insight monitor. So we have also discussed about the problems in the application code, tracking the transactions from the one application to another application. And we have discussed about configuring the alarms and the reports in the APM Insight Monitor.